Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream. Happy Thursday. I hope you all are having a great week so far and looking forward to a great weekend. I am Joe, and today we're going to be talking about an article that we actually kind of talked about 2 weeks ago. Long story short, young men, you are the problem for the housing crisis, and you're going to be responsible for the reason that home values crashed by 30%. Now, this isn't what I think. This is, of course, from some Wall Street bigwig, and who happens to be a very wealthy baby boomer. So why am I not surprised? So without any further ado, let's get into it. As always, if you are watching the stream, I would love to see where you're watching from. Drop a comment, drop a like. I'd really appreciate it. Helps out the stream, helps out my channel, and I'd love to hear what you think about this. Do you think young men are a problem for the housing market? Do you think they're going to be the ones that crash it? I'd love to know what you think, and I'd also like to know where you're watching from. So drop a comment in the comment section, and I would like to hear from you. So if you guys watch my streams regularly, you'll know that about let's see, 2 weeks ago, we covered an article about Meredith Whitney, who has the name of the Oracle of Wall Street because she happened to predict the great financial crisis. And when we say that she predicted the great financial crisis, she looked at the balance sheets in late 2007. She saw that there were some problems, and she said, "Hey, I think there's going to be some problems." And sure enough, there were. It's not like she predicted it years in advance or anything. I think she was ahead of just maybe a couple of weeks. Oh, hi, snowy deer. Hi, snowy winter deer. Thanks for watching from Prescott. Um, and so this lady says that she basically called the great financial crisis, and I think she's probably taking some liberties there. I don't know who gave her the name of the Wall Street Oracle, but it's a cool nickname, I guess. So I'm going to put this article up on the screen. Again, this is an article kind of from last week. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see. Oops, that's a little too big. Is this not going to cooperate? There we go. So there she is. This is Meredith Whitney, and I don't know for sure if she's a boomer, but I got to be honest. This has got boomer written all over it. And she's a Wall Street person, so I'm sure she's like filthy rich. She's the chief executive of her own advisory group. So it's kind of interesting that she's the one that's calling out this younger generation for being the problem for the housing crisis. So I'm not going to go through this whole article line by line because we covered this a couple weeks ago. I just want to kind of give a brief recap for the people that maybe didn't see that stream. Essentially, Meredith Whitney, deemed the Oracle of Wall Street because she successfully called the financial crisis, says that home prices are likely to fall substantially, and the reason has to do with habits picked up by young boys. You have men staying single longer. You have what I call a growing crisis of the young American male. They're twice as likely to live at home as opposed to women. So 1 out of 5 young men live at home with their parents. And these aren't young men going to college and coming home for holiday breaks. These are young men, grown men choosing to live at home. So basically, she's saying that because young men are living at home and like choosing to live at home, apparently that's going to be a problem for the housing crisis. And she thinks that this is basically going to sway the housing dynamic. Oh, hey, Michelle, thanks for tuning in. She thinks this is going to sway in a significant way the housing crisis and the housing market. And she talks about how there's going to be a multi-year / multi-decade decline. This is one of the lines in this article that I thought was really funny. I think you're going to start to see housing prices begin a multi-year / decade decline just due to supply demand dynamics. So is it a multi-year or is it multi-decade? Like this here is a claim that's like, oh, it could be 2 years and it could be 20 years because that's multi-year or multi-decade. So right off the bat, she's making these very broad generalizations of claims that that's like me saying, oh, the housing market's going to crash in the next couple of decades. Well, maybe, I don't know, but when you give yourself that much time to be right or wrong, chances are you will be. So basically, this whole article, she talks about how the fact that young men are not dating as much, they're choosing to live at home, and it's not young men going to college, it's like young men in their mid 20s to late 20s that are just sort of kind of failing to launch, if you will. And she's talking about how this is going to be a huge problem. She also talks about the silver tsunami, which is also something that we've covered in the live streams before. if you've joined me previously, this idea that there's a bunch of baby boomers out there, which that part is true, and they're going to they're going to start selling their big homes, and we're going to have this huge increase in supply of homes, and it's going to it's going to cause home prices to go down because we're going to get a flood of inventory, and that's really the only way that we're going to have a home prices significantly drop. Is right now it's a very basic supply and demand issue. We've all known that for a couple of years. A lot of people want to buy homes, mostly in the millennial generation, but there's just not a whole lot of homes available. Part of that is due to the United States as a whole not building homes for the last decade, ever since the great financial crisis. And then additionally, now with interest rates the way that they are, you have a lot of people that are not looking to move up in the home. So if they purchased a home before the pandemic, they're sitting on an interest rate of 3% or maybe even less. And they're very comfortable with their mortgage payment. It's very, very low. It's much lower than what other house they could go out and buy is. So they kind of have what we call the golden handcuffs. They're locked into their current home. So this silver tsunami thing, we don't see it happening. The reason it got the nickname silver tsunami is because it was supposed to be this flood, like a tidal wave, like a tsunami, this flood of inventory that was going to hit, and we're just not seeing that. We're seeing it more of a creep type of thing. So we just don't think that's going to happen. So this whole article talks about why Meredith Whitney thinks that there's going to be a housing crash. She thinks that due in part to boomers selling their homes. And again, I use boomers in like a term of endearment. I don't like to create these like millennial versus boomer wars or these generational wars. That's just what they're called, baby boomers. So she thinks this is going to happen. Wouldn't you know that she put out this article, and then she did a couple of interviews online. And in fact, we watched one of those interviews on the stream. And wouldn't you know that she got some flack for that. It's not a surprise. She basically got tore into by people, on the online forums, your Reddits and Instagrams and Facebooks, and a bunch of people told her, "You're insane. That is absolutely not the reason." And instead of her sort of reevaluating her statements, this lady doubled down. She was like, "No, no, no. I not only do I stand by what I said, but let me go one step further." And it blew my mind because I have, I am probably that group that she's talking about. I'm 34 myself, so I'm right in the middle of the millennial, a little, well, slightly on the younger side of the millennial generation. But a lot of my friends, some have bought houses, but a lot of my young male friends have not. And I want to make it clear, it's not because they don't want to buy houses or they don't want to own houses. I mean, maybe some people feel that way, but generally speaking, they do want to buy houses. They do want to own homes. It's just really freaking tough. It's really, really hard out there. Homes are very, very expensive. Millennials came up in a time post Great Financial Recession where the job market was just kind of getting back up on its feet. College is extremely expensive. A lot of millennials in my generation, old and young millennials, are just saddled with insane amounts of student debt, and that's really prevented them from home ownership. And then, of course, you have the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the inflation that came from that, and the housing crisis that came from that. So I really have a hard time believing that young millennial men don't want to own homes. I think it's just really, really, really difficult. So her assumption, her position that young men just don't have desire to own a home, so therefore they're just taking the easier route, and they're going to live at home, and therefore we're not going to have new households created. So at some point we're going to get to a point where we just don't have as much demand for houses. I think that's absolutely wrong, quite honestly. And I think that if there was ever a point where we had an increased demand in housing supply, or I'm sorry, an increased supply in housing, I think that supply would be gobbled up as quickly as it came by demand, because I think people understand that renting is not ideal for most people. Obviously, like, there's exceptions to everything, right? But for most people, they understand that rent is very wasteful. When you pay that landlord, you're never going to see that money again. It's never going to come back to you. And I think, they want to be smart with their money. It's just right now, renting is a lot easier. And right now, currently, it's actually probably a little bit cheaper, especially in the short term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen with a different article. So this is her new one. This is Miss Meredith's new. I want. Oh no, I shared the wrong one. Let me do a different one here. Okay. So this article is now from about a week ago, or a little bit less. And so here she is again. Here's Ms. Meredith. Uh, she looks like, and maybe this is because maybe her millennial son is in her basement. Maybe she's just like really upset and frustrated and annoyed that her millennial son is like mooching off of her success and wealth. I have no idea. That's just a guess. But this is the article I want to go over today. Um, So first she says it's young American males that are the problem, and then like she really doubles down. So Meredith Whitney, the one-time oracle of Wall Street who predicted the great financial crisis, doesn't mince her words. So she's just embracing it like full on. Young single men living at home and playing video games are behind a crisis of the American male. She explained in an interview with Fortune. So now it's not just young men, but dang it, it's those dang video games, which I feel like we've been blaming video games for problems since about the 1990s. First is like video games are going to rot your brain. And it's like, oh, video games are so violent, it's going to cause kids to be violent. And now, wouldn't you know it, video games are going to be responsible for a 30% reduction in housing prices. This is crazy, and we're about to get to the good part too. So her theory about dateless, I can't even get this without laughing. Her theory about dateless, spiraling young men ends with home prices declining for years or even decades. Oh my God. Whitney sees home prices falling 30%, but it's not the end of the world in her mind because of how much prices went up during the pandemic fueled housing boom. There's so much equity stored up in American homes, there's no collateral damage from that. People then, on paper, are worth less than they thought they were, Whitney said. It sounds dramatic, but it's really not that dramatic just because you've had so much massive inflation from the zero interest rate policy. Now, I get what she's saying um, that if home prices were to fall 30%, home prices went up so far so quickly that if they did fall 30%, it wouldn't create a problem. However, it absolutely would create a problem. I mean, imagine if you lost 30% of the value in an asset or an investment, in a relatively short term. That's not going to make anybody feel good. And if that causes you to have to sell your home or move, sure, might not affect the mass numbers of people like it did in the great financial crisis, but that's not a good thing. And I feel like this is such an insulated view. Like this is exactly the type of viewpoint from someone who is immune to any type of financial crisis because they're filthy stinking rich. They're in the top 1%. So of course she doesn't think a 30% drop in home values is a problem for her, because even if the 7 homes that she owns, I don't actually know if she owns 7. I'm just taking a stab at it. I wouldn't be surprised though. But if her portfolio of real estate drops by 30%, oh, boohoo for her, but she still has, millions and millions of dollars. So, it's unaffected. For normal people though, where their home is their biggest asset, it's their biggest investment, it is their nest egg, that home equity, that dropping 30% would not be insignificant. So just that right there, we're like into the first paragraph and she's already made some just insane claims that I think are quite frankly freaking stupid. Um, as of last year, almost 40% of American homeowners were mortgage free, meaning they own their home outright. So no loan, no mortgage. They're not making a monthly mortgage payment. They have it free and clear. Although they'd probably be upset to see their net worth fall that much, on the other hand, those who missed the mark and didn't buy a home before the run up in prices during the pandemic might be happy. But let's go back to the premise. Young men who are actually only part of the equation, and it's something she's discussed before. This goes back to the previous article that we talked about, where she's talking about um, young men are going to create a problem for the housing market. A lot of young men are single. A study from the Pew Research Center found last year more than 60% of men under 30 describe themselves as unattached in a survey conducted by the Pew Research Center. Whitney referred to this analysis in her thinking. The aforementioned study also found the share of single men in the country looking to date or be in a relationship has declined since 2019, which Whitney alluded to and emphasized that a portion of young single men haven't gotten down in the past year and don't seem to be bothered by it. More men are living at home with their parents and for longer, too. A 2016 report from the Pew Research Center found young men were more likely to live at home with mom and dad than a partner. Now, Pew Research is a really well-known research center, and they've conducted a lot of research over the years. I think that probably their research is probably accurate, and it's probably truthful, and it was probably done in a legitimate, authentic way. But again, Pew Research has these numbers, has these figures, has this data, but they're not the ones drawing the conclusion here. Ms. Whitney is drawing the conclusion here. So this is a really important article. So let's kind of like take this from the top. A lot of young men are single. Uh, so more than 60% of men under 30 describe themselves as unattached, and they're not really looking to date or be in a relationship, and that number's declined since 2019. Okay, that's kind of interesting. So obviously in 2020 we had the pandemic, and that significantly changed the way that people interacted. So I understand that this survey was conducted slightly before that. The results of the survey were probably compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, and I can't really comment on this directly. If anybody is watching that knows me personally, I've been married for 10 years. I married my high school sweetheart. I never had to really mess with the dating world, thankfully. Thankfully. But I have friends, and I do know that some of my friends have alluded to it. It's kind of tough out there right now. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And just the way that young men and women interact now is just it's way different. Obviously there's been a culture shift. The Me Too movement kind of changed the tone with the way that men interacted with women, and vice versa too, and obviously probably for the better, but still, we're in a different territory than we were for a large part of our modern history. And I think it's just a lot of this has to do with young men and women kind of coming to terms with how to move forward in terms of dating and finding a partner. Now, one thing we do know that this article does not bring up is that things like milestones, they're just happening later. That's just the way that we're trending. People are graduating college later. People are getting married later. People are starting families later. People are buying homes later. People are dying later. I mean, things are just getting more delayed. I don't know what the reason for that is. You could probably speculate and make a couple different arguments for that. Why do you think that's happening? Drop a comment. Let me know. Why do you think maybe major life events are being delayed, including homeownership and that formation of families, which is usually kind of a precursor to home sales. So why do you think that's happening? Michelle says, if I had $1 for every time video games were blamed for something, yeah, I know. I almost feel like it's that like when our parents, like when boomers were young and it was our grandparents and like rock and roll music came out. And they're like, oh my God, rock and roll. It's gonna like rot the brains of our kids and it's gonna incite violence. Like that's what I feel like video games got the same treatment. And of course it's happening here. Of course, I'm a gamer myself. I love to play me some video games. Didn't stop me from owning a home though. So, but that's just anecdotal evidence. Um, so while this data from Pew Research is quite interesting, um, it talks about how the aforementioned study also found the share of single men in the country looking to date or be in a relationship has declined since 2019. But then for Meredith Whitney to make the claim, single men haven't gotten busy in the past year and don't seem to be bothered by it. Did she ask a bunch of young American men? I find that hard to believe, and I think now we're kind of moving into a culture where, you know, um, people look at relationships in a little bit more casual way. So her connection to, you know, young men and women participating in a certain activity. I don't want to get censored on YouTube, so I'll choose my words wisely. Um, doesn't necessarily mean they're in a relationship. And she's kind of taking this. Oh well, because they're not looking to be in a relationship, they're not hooking up with each other. Well, those two things aren't necessarily connected. Should they be? I don't know. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that, again, Miss Whitney is she's making a real stretch here. She's just making a real stretch, in my opinion. Um, Now, of course, in 2016, there was this report from Pew that said men were more likely to live at home with their mom and dad than a partner. You know, it's no secret that women have gone into home ownership earlier. Single women tend to buy more homes than single men. And I've got a chart that we're going to bring that up in a moment, and we're going to talk about that. So, where does all this stem from? Mid 2000s video games in Whitney's mind. So back to these mid 2000s video games. So that was when basically when millennials were basically we're talking about almost 20 years ago. So I'm 34, so that would put me at 14. So a lot of these prime millennials between the ages of 10 and 20, or 12 and 22, 24, prime video game playing age. So mid 2000s videos games in Whitney's mind, you have an ability to feel like you're gaming with a group of friends or community, but you're really just at home alone. Oh my gosh. Okay. Like, just this one sentence blows my mind, because here's why. I don't know if she's ever heard of a website called Twitch, but it's a live streaming website where you can watch people play video games. And streamers and video game players have entire communities of people that know each other. They meet up in real life. They know each other's first names. I mean, there's social gatherings in real life and also online. And even just anecdotally from my own personal experience, um, I play video games. My main video game is Call of Duty. If you're a Call of Duty player, drop the gamer tag in the comments. We'll play some games together. I play Call of Duty, and I have met some awesome guys playing that video game. In fact, I've even sold a house to a guy that I met playing Call of Duty. And on top of that, my Call of Duty group has even gotten together in real life, and we've hung out, we had a barbecue, we met each other's families and wives and kids, and this idea that when you're gaming online, you're in this you're in it's like you're plugged into the matrix, and you're not with real people. It feels like you're with real people, but you're not. No, you absolutely are with real people. Are you with them physically and tangibly? No, maybe not, but that doesn't mean that you won't be led that way. So again, there's just so much I disagree with here, but it's kind of entertaining. So she says you have the ability to feel like you're gaming with a group of friends or community, but you're really just at home alone, she said. And so the socialization of young American male really started to break down significantly around that time. So again, she's saying around the mid 2000s, this is when the young American male really had problems socializing. I, I don't know. I mean, I went to school. I went to junior high. I went to high school. I made friends. I still have those friends. I still went out. I still went to concerts. I still hung out with people. Um, I feel like this is just, again, it's a stretch. I think she's really, really stretching, and I'm so confused at where she's getting this. I mean, like I said, there's research that supports the idea that males are interacting in different ways, but I don't think that necessarily means that it's a crisis, or that it's a huge problem, or that's going to certainly lead to a housing issue. According to Whitney, as gaming went up, so did the malaise, noting a despondency and rampant loneliness amongst young men. In a recent note her advisor group produced, notice how there's no study here. There's no data. This is coming from her. According to her, as gaming went up, so did malaise, noting a despondency and rampant loneliness amongst young men. I don't know. I feel like this is the old rock and roll argument. I feel like this is the whole, like, oh, rock and roll is gonna rot kids' brains, and it's gonna make them all be violent and angry, and obviously that didn't happen. Okay. The gaming explosion was driven by technological improvements, true, and the growing popularity of gaming on an iPhone, and it coincided with a poor job market. Combined, these forces have created a cohort of young men who don't know how to socialize. In her view, these three words are like Super, super pivotal in her view. This isn't any scientific research here. Um, so she's talking about because we have iPhones with games on them, and the job market was poor in the mid 2000s, 2008. Um, Guys were like, screw it, I don't need to get a real job. I don't need to meet girls. I don't need to make friends. I'm just gonna game on my iPhone. I I'm having a really hard time believing that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things that you can do on an iPhone for entertainment purposes, entertainment value. There's a ton of games. There's a ton of free games in the App Store. We all know this. The idea that that is what is causing men to not interact with women and other people is kind of a joke. Um, this is just, and then of course, again, this is all in her view. Let's continue on with what's in her view. Gaming and social isolation are somewhat of a vicious cycle in which the lack of real social contact creates a sense of social unease, making real social contact much more uncomfortable, the note states. So I don't know if I necessarily disagree with this point. This is the idea that because you're gaming and you're socially isolated, um, you don't want to create any type of social connection, and because you don't create social connection, it's harder to create social connection. So you go back to isolating. And because you're isolating and playing video games, then you don't want to create social connection. And it just kind of, it's this negative feedback loop. Again, I don't know how necessarily how true that is, but this lady's wild. Again, I think she's got a millennial son living in her basement. That's what I think. I think she's got a millennial son, and maybe she's just venting some of her own frustrations on people. Last year, an analysis found that 65% of Americans played video games, and that equated to more than 200 million weekly players. And a 2015 report from the Pew Research Center found that 70% of young men play video games more than any other demographic. She said something similar before, only it was about sports betting. Okay. So what? And is any of this a surprise? 65% of Americans played video games. And this is last year. I mean, this is 2023. This is a modern day society. We have technological advancements. We've had video games for a very, very long time. I mean, my parents played video games in the 80s on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. I mean, playing Mario Brothers and stuff. Like, this is 65% of Americans playing video games. They act like that's a crazy stat. I mean, I really don't think it's that alarming. And by the way, we all have hobbies. I'm sure the number of people, as we go through life and as we go through different years and decades, I'm sure there's an ebb and flow of what people tend to do and like to do in their free time. I mean, I'm sure back in like the 1920s and 30s and 40s, listening to the radio was like a huge 87% of Americans listen to the radio. Now, I bet if you took that same question and applied it to America, it's a lot lower because the times have changed and people's interests change and hobbies change. I think that 65% of Americans played video games, and again, last year analysis found that 65% of Americans played video games. What does that mean? Like they played them once, they played them twice, they played them constantly? It's kind of vague there. I just don't think that's that big of a deal. And then, of course, 70% of them being young men playing video games more than any other demographic. Well, yeah, of course. Old men are raising families. They're playing golf. They're doing other things. Typically, in the gaming community, girls, females, women, they make up just a much smaller percentage because they probably have other hobbies that they like to do that aren't video games. Although I will say, it seems like just in my participation with the gaming community, female gamers have shot up in not only just popularity but just in occurrence. So I feel like ladies are definitely uh, more inclined and more likely to play video games today than maybe they were 10 and 20 and 30 years ago. Unless you're creating a household, there's no reason to buy a house. What? Whitney said, touching on household formations and birth rates. Before the pandemic, household growth over the previous decade was the lowest ever recorded per Pew, but another account shows a surge in household growth from 2019 and 2021. Unless you're creating a household, there's no reason to buy a house. Again, patently, I think that's false. I just don't think I think that's a bad take. I think it's a bad take. I think there's a lot of good reasons to buy a house, and I don't think creating a new household is the only reason. I think it's a very good reason. I think it's a very strong reason, but I don't necessarily think that's the only reason to buy a house. Still, household formation, and again, like I was talking about earlier, household formation is like one of these like hardcore, like serious metrics that analysts look at to determine if what's going to happen with the housing market. Just like, oh, were there a lot of new build permits issued? Okay, then we know that there's going to be a lot more new homes being built, and maybe supply will go up. And household formation is like that, but on the demand side. So if we know like, oh, there's been a lot of new households formed, well, that means that there's going to be demand for housing and houses, and we could see prices go up, or competition go up amongst home buyers. Still, household formation and demand for housing is only part of the equation. The other has to do with a silver tsunami. Here we go again, a metaphor for an aging population, really baby boomers in the housing world. There are varying estimates and predictions regarding the silver tsunami, but it all essentially boils down to more supply. Whitney, toward the end of last year, said 51% of people over the age of 50 are set to downsize to smaller homes, citing an AARP report at a conference. That would bring more than 30 million housing units to the market. Separately, a recent Freddie Mac analysis revealed 9 million homes were set to come on the market in the next decade as baby boomers age, but suggested it wasn't going to really disrupt the housing world. And that's the take that I take. I think Freddie Mac is correct. 30 million housing units, that's just not going to happen. More people are aging in place. More people are aging in their home. Boomers are certainly in a position where they could sell and downsize. They're in a position where they may want to downsize and put their big home up for sale. But again, it's really difficult because wherever they're going to go, if they do need a mortgage, the rate's going to be much higher. Depending on legislation, their property taxes could be much higher. Here in California, where I am, I'm in Claremont, California, so I'm just outside Los Angeles. Here in California, we have a law in the books, one of the few good laws in California that basically say that if you're over the age of 55, you can petition to have your property taxes transferred to your new home. Now, there's some limits with that. There's some caveats, and it doesn't always work the way that people want it to work, but it's good. It's good. There are other places where that's not the case. And if you're a baby boomer and you decide to buy a new home, and the home that you have lived in for 40 years you bought for 71,000, you're paying taxes on 71,000. That new home that you buy that's 450,000 or 320,000, you're paying taxes on that amount. And if you're on a fixed income, that's a big shock. So this idea that boomers are going to just massively sell their homes because they have to downsize, I don't see that happening, and I think Freddie Mac is more correct. I do think we are going to see boomers obviously downsize and sell, but I think it's going to be at a much slower pace, and it's not going to disrupt the market because the demand will be there to absorb it. The other thing that we're seeing a lot more is instead of boomers selling their homes, we're seeing homes being passed down to the generation. Again, what she's talking about, we have these boomer age parents, and they go, you know what, I'm not going to sell my home. I'm going to pass it down to my kid because it's so difficult to buy a house right now and get a down payment. I'd rather just keep the house in the family. There are some states that will allow kids to inherit the tax rate of their parents. So now not only does the child not have to buy a house, but they can take over the tax rate and the tax payments, which is a huge savings for those people potentially. So I think more baby boomers are going to pass down their homes. Maybe they'll do something where they do, they pass down their home to their son or daughter who's a millennial. Then maybe that son or daughter takes out a home equity line of credit, gets 250,000, turns around, gives that money to mom and dad, uses that to buy a house cash, and then now all of a sudden the kids are only have a mortgage of 250,000 as opposed to 700,000 if they had to go out and buy that home. And there's more things out there. If you guys have questions about kind of how to buy homes like that, you can send me a DM directly here on YouTube, or you can send me an email. My information will be in a pinned comment down below on the recording. And I'm happy to talk to you about that if you need more information on how to transfer property amongst your own family to save on taxes. Either way, she sees more supply and not enough demand in the coming years. Okay, which will culminate in plummeting home prices, essentially our current situation inverted. Again, she hasn't really said how or why that's going to happen, other than guys are playing video games. They're not out there getting down with women, and so we're not having babies and we're not creating households, so they're not going to buy houses. That's like the jump. That's the leap that Ms. Whitney has made. Presently, we don't have enough housing to meet demand. One estimate, I lost my spot. One estimate shows we're actually missing anywhere between roughly 2 million and 7 million homes. Right. And home prices keep escalating because of it. Whitney doesn't think we have a housing shortage, not on a national scale. Where has this lady been? We don't have a housing shortage? Maybe for her in the 18 homes that she owns, go to anyone right now. Not only do we have a housing shortage, we have an affordable housing shortage. We have a rental housing shortage. We have just about every type of housing shortage you can imagine right now. So I don't know why she's saying that. If anything, there's a shortage of affordable housing. Yeah, there is, and not enough housing where people actually want to live, she explained. Calling our housing crisis a metropolitan crisis might be better, a housing policy analyst once told Fortune. Okay, so this idea that we don't have a housing crisis, we have a desirable housing crisis. Okay, I see where she's going there. She's saying we do have homes, but where the homes are, people don't want to live. And maybe that's true, but I got news. I think if there was any area where there was affordable homes, people would go there. I mean, now we're seeing that, to counter her point, and in one of my previous streams, we talked about this, the inaffordability of homes, where, it used to be if you wanted to buy a home in a few areas, a few metropolitan areas, you had to make $100,000 a year. But that was only applicable to about 6 different metropolitan areas where you had to make 100,000 to afford an average home. Now that number is now 22 states plus Washington D.C. So now in 23 different areas in the United States, you have to make over 100,000. And some of those areas are like Arizona and Texas and these areas where you'd think, oh, Utah was one of them, Nevada was one of them, and it's like, well, those characteristically aren't metropolitan areas that ooze with desirability, but yet homes are still expensive there. So I see what she's saying about people all wanting to live in the same spot, which is what we see here in my area and in Claremont and the greater Los Angeles area. So again, Claremont's a suburb of Los Angeles, about 40 miles east of downtown LA. And that's what we have here. It's a really small town. It's very coveted. It's very desirable. And a lot of people want to live here. So even if our housing inventory doubled overnight, we still wouldn't see a drop in home prices, I don't think. In fact, it would be great because I have a lot of buyers looking to buy homes here, and there's just not a lot to sell them. So I understand what she's saying. I don't know exactly how much it applies, though. Even so, some research has shown that single women are buying homes more than single men. So maybe they'd save the housing universe. Not a chance, Whitney said. Women, you can't do it either. Men screwed it up and women can't save us. This lady's crazy. How many single women are going to buy 4-bedroom, 3-bath homes? She then brought up the 5 Ds of real estate: diapers, diamonds, divorce, debt, and death. Without those, I just don't think it's going to be a big enough driver. Still, if what she's predicting comes true, it won't be another housing crash. And that's right. This is not going to be a crash. Again, like I said, we know that single women have bought more homes, and I'm actually going to flip to a different tab really quickly. Let me see. Did I lose my? And I want to show you guys. I want to show you guys the. Let me pull this up really quick. I want to show you guys some of the information about single female homebuyers. Go here. We're gonna go here. So I got to switch some stuff around. We're gonna share this tab instead. All right. So now you guys can see this. So these are just some stats from National Association of Realtors, NAR. This is as of November 13th, 2023. So pretty recent. And I want to go down to number 4. All right. The share of married couples in the housing market continues to ease while singles, especially single women, rise. And this is where I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so y'all can see. go. There we go. Um, so uh, overall, marriage rates have lowered from previous decades, and that demographic shift is reflected in today's housing market. The share of singles is 29% of the overall market, while married couples have declined to 59% from a high of 81% in the 1980s. There are notable differences in what single buyers purchase regarding home size and neighborhood amenities, which obviously that makes sense. If you're single, you're going to need a smaller place. Maybe you're more open to a townhome or condo than a single family home. If you are single, you probably want to be a little bit closer to the action, bars, restaurants, shopping, all that fun stuff, amenities like that. So here's the chart, and a couple things I want to talk about here. Uh, so married couples, this blue line. So here we are in the 80s, like it was like super high. This is that 81%, and up and down, up and down. But overall down, kind of ticked back up after the housing crisis, when housing was a little bit more affordable, interest rates were low. It kind of ticked back up, and then kind of ticked back down, and up and down, up and down. And here we are at 59% as of the end of 2023. Here's the interesting part: single females. Single females, if we all know, females tend to make better decisions than males, and especially when it comes to finances. For some reason or another, single females just make better financial decisions. So, guys, you got to step it up a little bit. Start thinking. As you can see, from when this chart even started in 1981, 1981 is actually kind of close. So the gray line is males, is single males, and the green line is single females. So in 81, like it was really close. It was like within a percentage point or so. And then it dropped off in the 80s and it stayed under. And sure enough, we see this gap here kind of get further and further apart, and females, up and down, but overall higher. Um, and still doing very well. Of course, dropped a little bit, and actually males kind of flatlined and they kind of closed some ground. And then in 2016 or so, males really took a dip. Females bumped up a little bit, up and down, and here we are. So as of 2023, 19% for single females, 9% for single males. But this is the interesting thing, right? And this is what I want to point out. If Miss Whitney is correct, that oh my God, this idea that single males don't want to meet women, they don't want to form households, they certainly don't want to buy a house, and it's this new phenomenon that is going to crash the housing market. It's BS, and I'm going to show you why right now. So look at this line, this gray line. It's hovered between probably down here being what, maybe 7%, and a high of maybe 11%. It's hovered between that since 1981. Since 1981, single males really haven't deviated that much. It's not like this gray line was way up here and then all of a sudden just tanked. And it's like, oh well, that's going to be a problem because now we have this change. We have this change in this fundamental shift in what's happening. No, that's not the case at all. Honestly, unmarried couples have a bigger deviation than that, and they were very low in 91, almost zero, and then they popped up to 9%. This is not if you took the average of this line, it's hardly moved at all. I mean, I really wish they had I really wish this was an active graph where when you highlight a certain section, it would tell you the percentage at that time. This is not that. This is just a picture. But this just shows that single men really haven't been that active in the home buying market for the last 40 years. So this idea that they're going to somehow now have this big change it blows my mind, and that's why I think her claims are really ridiculous. And I got one other thing, but I got to take a drink of my LaCroix tangerine water, this is a really good flavor, by the way. I think this is a setup. And remember, Miss Whitney is a Wall Street gal, right? She's a big Wall Street person. She's not a real estate person. She's not a psychologist or someone that studies young people and demographics. No, she's a Wall Street person. I think, this, I'm not alone in this. I was watching another live stream from another realtor that covered this topic a little bit, and I think she's exactly right in her thought process, and I agree with her. Um, Basically the idea is we know that institutional investors, Wall Street, people like BlackRock and Tricon and all these different people are gobbling up affordable homes left and right, left and right, left and right. I mean, they're buying entire neighborhoods, not so much in metropolitan areas, um, more so in the rural areas, and the more affordable areas, um, and they're buying tons of homes. And kind of the school of thought here is that I think this is a setup. I think they're setting us up to say, well, see, young men, they stop buying homes. So you know what? If they would have bought homes, then us Wall Street investors, we wouldn't have been able to buy them, and we wouldn't have been able to compete. But because young men stopped buying homes, well, now we're going to buy them because someone has to buy them, right? We can't just not buy homes anymore. And I think this is a little bit of a narrative for Wall Street to be like, see, look, we're trying to help you. We're trying to help. We're trying to help alleviate the problem of people being able to sell homes. And I think it's just absolutely preposterous. Um, and I think this graph kind of proves it. Again, single males have never been a huge participant and a huge driving force in the home buying market. It's just ridiculous. And I think for this Wall Street person to come in and act like, blame not only just the average person, but the little guy, the young American male that, quite frankly, has had a little bit of an uphill battle when you consider the fact that the demographic of person she's talking about went through the great financial crisis, graduated high school and college during the worst economy the United States has ever seen, aside from the Great Depression. And then, just as the economy was building back up, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which that wouldn't have killed us, no pun intended. That wouldn't have killed us. But the huge inflation from that, and the years of historically low interest rates, uh, you know, skyrocketing in comparison, millennial males have not had the easiest road to be successful financially and in home buying. So at the end of the day, uh, Meredith, our friend Meredith from the Wall Street Oracle, um, I disagree, Meredith, and I think you're completely wrong. I don't think young men are to blame for the housing crisis. I don't think it's because they want to play video games all day. I think that it's because young men feel like they have a very challenging future. I think young females feel the same way too, but I feel like they think that the road ahead is very, very challenging. They feel like the American dream is dead, and they feel like the road to homeownership is extremely tumultuous and difficult. And a lot of that has to do because of Wall Street. And then here you have a Wall Street person that's going to talk down upon people. It's like literally the pot calling the kettle black. It's so annoying to me. To have someone say, oh yeah, it's this very small group of people, it's their fault. um, I just I don't see it. And another reason I don't think that there's going to be a housing crash, especially in the vein of 30 freaking percent. Let's just take a look at this NPR article. Housing. Oh, got to put it up on the screen because you guys can't see it. Here, let's do this one. Housing experts say there just aren't enough homes in the U.S. This is as of 2 days ago. Um, Finding an affordable place to live in the US can feel pretty impossible whether you're a renter or a buyer. To begin with, there's a massive shortage of homes, somewhere between 4 and 7 million. And those who are able to find homes are spending a much bigger chunk of their paycheck than in recent years. Natalie French was renting an apartment with a roommate in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when they received a notice that their rent was going up by more than $200 a month. With the added pet fees, they were put out of their price range. Again, so, and Ms. Natalie, I'm going to assume that Natalie is a female, so this doesn't have to do with the male female thing. But here you go. Here's a reason right here why young people are having a hard time affording homes. They can't even afford the rent increases, let alone saving up a down payment to purchase a home. French told her roommate French and her roommate ultimately decided to move out and part ways. And for French, that meant leaving Albuquerque altogether to go back home to live with her mother. And I don't fault Miss French for this. I feel like this is a reoccurring theme. This is a very common thing. And this just goes to show that you can't just blame young men. It's young people in general that it's not because they want to live at home. It's because it's very difficult to not live at home with the cost of everything. And the other thing that I love is this is Albuquerque, New Mexico. This isn't Miami. This isn't New York. This isn't Los Angeles. This isn't Seattle. This isn't Austin. This isn't one of these major metropolitan areas where it's really fun to live in and it's cool and it's hip, but it's really, really expensive. This is Albuquerque, New Mexico. Not necessarily typically thought of as being, a real high cost of living area. It's a difficult situation, not just for renters, but also for prospective home buyers. Yes, this is what we've been saying. Ellen Lamont lives in Denver, Colorado with her partner. They put down offers on more than 20 homes because they kept losing out to other buyers before finally closing on one. This idea of having your dream home is not realistic. Even at my age, it's just where can I live? Where can I even get a place? So, you know, Ms. Whitney talks about how there's going to be a housing crash because young men aren't dating and they're not forming new households. The proof is in the pudding. We know that that's just not true. We know that it's very difficult for young people in general to buy homes or even just to rent homes. It's not because they don't want to. And with a shortage of 4 to 7 million homes in the U.S. and most of those being affordable homes, those in the 250, 350, $400,000 price point. Um, that's not going to change anytime soon. And guess why there's a shortage in those homes? Yes, it's a little bit because they haven't been built, but it's more so because corporate investors and Wall Street are buying up your homes. They're buying up first time buyer homes and they're buying them up. They're outbidding everyone. They're paying cash because they have billions and billions and billions of dollars to do so. And they're going to turn around and rent it to you. And then you're going to end up like Miss French here. And all of a sudden, every year, every 9 months, your rent's going to go up $100, $200, $300 because that is by design. That's exactly what they want to happen. Um, so that's just the way that it is. Alex Horvitz, we're just short on all homes, full stop. There just aren't enough of them. And that means that existing homes are getting bid up because we see high income households competing with low income households for the same residence, since just not enough are being built. What's driving this and why? So restrictive zoning is the primary culprit. It's made it hard to build homes in the areas where there are jobs. And so that has created an immense housing shortage, and each home is getting bid up, whether it's a rental or whether it's a home to buy. So this goes on to talk about how, there's issues with zoning and where you can build homes, and which is leading to a consistent uh, supply issue. Um, and that's why I just don't think that there's going to be a substantial uh, change in home prices in the near future. Now, of course, over time, as boomers age out and quite frankly pass on, uh, Gen Z is a little bit smaller generation than the millennials. Um, Birth rates are a little bit lower. Hopefully, home building continues, and we will have a little bit of a reprieve from the housing shortage that we have. One thing that I think should be done in order to temper the housing crisis and the housing shortage that we have is we need to do two things. We need to create some legislation that really incentivizes builders to build affordable homes. Um, and builders right now are not building affordable homes. They're building expensive homes because they can make more money. It doesn't cost that much more to build a bigger home, but you can charge a lot more in terms of the price. So why would you build a 1,300 square foot home if for just 10 or 15% more you could build a 3,100 square foot home, but then charge 50% more for that home? So I get it. So what needs to happen is we need to incentivize builders to build affordable homes based on where they're building them. So if we take a certain county, and let's just say a builder says, I want to build in Happyville County in whatever state, and the median income in Happyville is $50,000, then they need to be incentivized to build homes that are affordable on that average salary in that given area. How this can be done, everybody likes to save on taxes. So maybe we give a tax credit, a tax break, some tax incentives to the builder or developer that decides to develop those homes in that area at an affordable price point. I think that's probably a real heck of a good way to do that. Also, I think that cities need to be more forceful, and they need to say, hey, listen, if you want to make money on our citizens and our land, we're not going to suggest what you need to build. We're just going to tell you what you need to build. And this is what you need to build. You need to build multifamily properties. You need to build small homes for purchase, not for rent. I think cities just need to get a little bit more forceful with what they're willing and able to allow and what they're not willing and not able to allow, because obviously we can't continue down this path. So this, I think that the fact that the housing crisis is going to remain. I think that Miss Whitney is, boy, I think she's got some weird stuff going on. I think she's made some weird claims. And even in the first article that started all this, the author of that article said that Miss Whitney didn't really have any data or info driving this. And again, I think that's the same. I think that's the same here. So as we wrap up, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think young men playing video games is going to be a problem for the housing market? Or do you think there's something else at play? And again, I can just tell you, just based on my experience, and of course, real estate's hyper local. Again, I'm in the greater Los Angeles area. I've been a realtor for 10 years in this area. I've seen prices go up for the most part, stabilize, and then go through the roof. And I can tell you right now that we still have multiple offers on almost every single home that gets put on the market. We have very low inventory. It does create an affordability crunch, and it continues. It continues to be a problem. So I don't think there's going to be a shortage in housing anytime soon. So with that said, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed this stream. If you can do me a favor, please drop a comment, hit the like, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and I very much appreciate it. If there's any topics that you'd like me to cover on a live stream, suggest them in the comments below or send me a DM. I'd be happy to cover it. And I'm not just covering topics in the local area that I'm in, Los Angeles. I'm happy to talk about anything in the nation or across the world if it relates to real estate. If you guys have any questions about buying or selling or the real estate process, I'd be happy to help and advise you. Listen, a lot of times when you punch things into Google, you're going to get conflicting information. You're going to go down the rabbit hole and you're not going to know what to believe or trust. But rest assured, I'm here to help. So even if you just have a really basic question about real estate or mortgages or how to buy a house, how to start the buying process, how to sell a house, anything like that, shoot me a DM, send me an email, and I'd be happy to have a no obligation, no cost consultation with you just to kind of point you in the right direction. I love helping people and I love providing good real estate information because it's important. So thank you for joining me on this stream. I will see you guys next week with another live stream. Have a great evening. I'll see you soon.